Right, right. No, you're right. They're obviously interrelated, and obviously if we put a price on carbon that raised the price of fossil fuels, then that would help create incentives for entrepreneurs and innovators to then work more on alternatives. So you're absolutely right, they're interconnected. But at the same time, I think it's useful to recognize that there are two parts, because it isn't simply that the free market, doesn't know how to deal with, climate change as an external cost. I mean, that is true. But it's also the case that there are a lot of people out there today who say they accept the scientific evidence of climate change, like I'm thinking particularly of, say, the Breakthrough Institute. They accept the scientific evidence of climate change. They don't deny that it's real and that it's true, but they think the solution is technological innovation, and, this is the key additional part, we leave it to the marketplace to come up with that innovation because the marketplace is the most effective way or efficient means to get that, and it would be wrong for the government to try to solve the problem because the government, doesn't know how to do innovation very well. And the problem with that argument is that it presupposes that the market left to its own devices will give us the innovation we need. And I think what we see from the empirical evidence is that that's not always the case. I mean, there certainly are cases where technological innovation in the marketplace responds to needs either perceived or not yet perceived, and innovation does occur often spontaneously and without government intervention. But it doesn't always occur without government intervention, and it doesn't always occur in the way we need. One of the things I teach about in the history of technology that I find really interesting is the history of the contraceptive pill. When the pill came on the market, and I think of the pill as sort of the first biotechnology, right? When the pill came on the market, it was one of the most rapidly adopted technologies in the history of technology. And it's interesting, if you ask people, sometimes at the start of term I'll ask my students, what do you think are the most important technological innovations in the history of mankind? And they might say the wheel, or fire, or the internet, or smartphones, or the laptop computer. Right. And nobody ever says hormonal birth control. And then I say, well, what about the birth control pill? And then suddenly they go, oh yeah, right. Because they don't think of it as a technology, but of course it is. It's a biotechnology. Within 3 years of the pill coming on the market, 50 million Americans were taking it. 50 million Americans, well, we assume they were all women. 50 million Americans had prescriptions for the contraceptive pill. It's like incredible uptake, right? Incredibly rapid uptake. And that's great. It tells us that people wanted this technology and saw it as valuable and useful. But how did we get the pill? Was the pill the result of just the free market doing its thing, realizing that women wanted an effective, easy-to-use birth control method? Well, does anybody know the answer to that question? No, it's obviously you can expect what it is. No, it wasn't just spontaneous. It turned out that Margaret Sanger, one of the early advocates for birth control and population control in the United States, believed in the 1920s that women needed a birth control pill. And so she went and found a philanthropist, a woman named Catherine McCormick, to finance the scientific research to develop a birth control pill in order to satisfy this need. And the initial work was entirely done by Sanger and McCormick, finding scientists who were willing to work on it. And one of the interesting parts of the story is that one of the early important scientists, Gregory Pincus, was actually driven out of Harvard because Harvard considered birth control research to be inappropriate. I love that. So I don't know if Larry Summers knows that story, but he really should, right? So, but the work was done, and eventually it got far enough along that then when it got to a point where it started to become imaginable that you could actually produce a commercial project, then they were able to recruit companies like Syntex and Searle to become interested in and pick it up and actually do the final stages and produce a marketable product. But the early research was actually done because of two women who decided that this work needed to be done. So it's just one story. There are many other ones. The other famous one, of course, is the history of the internet, which we know was largely funded by the U.S. government through ARPA. It was ARPANET before it became internet. And in fact, the U.S. government had to work hard to find commercial providers who were willing to take on the internet. And there was a period in the history of ARPANET where the U.S. government went to AT&T and offered basically to give AT&T ARPANET, and AT&T said, well, what do you want with that, So, I mean, the point is there are lots and lots of examples. The history of technological innovation is very complicated, but the idea that the technologies we need come about spontaneously in a free market, that's just not supported by the empirical evidence. So I was just trying to bring out that point. Does that make sense?